Let's get an insight into what is in President Trump's mind and also in the minds of the Republican Party. Are they the same thing is an interesting question with the Times' Washington editor Katy Balls, who we normally speak to down the line to a darkened room in Washington in the middle of the night. But gloriously for us, she's joining us in the studio this morning. Katy, morning.
Morning.
What is Donald Trump playing at when it comes to Greenland? That's what this really boils right down to, I think.
Yeah, well, I think there are clearly a few factors at play, but I also think it's worth pointing out that while it was, a sense definitely on Saturday that European leaders were blindsided by the tariffs, there have been lots of figures in Washington, D.C. who haven't quite taken him literally when he's been speaking about Greenland. They've been of the view, this is something he says, but how serious is he about it? Is there some other type of landing zone? And if you think when he first returned to the White House, and we're nearly tomorrow on Tuesday, 1 year since the inauguration, that was the period by which he was talking about Greenland. He sent his son, Donald Trump Jr., on a trip there. But then he seemed to get distracted and focus on other issues for a bit. Now it's come back. And I think since his actions in Venezuela, people start to say, oh no, he is really serious about the Western Hemisphere. Greenland fits into that. And I think he's also looking for a legacy. I think Donald Trump would love to go down as the president who expanded the map of America. And
he loves McKinley, doesn't he? McKinley's
exactly.
His great idol who was there when they took the Philippines and the idea of expanding the American empire.
Exactly. He often refers to him as his favourite of the presidents. And therefore, I think that a second-term president is going to start thinking of that. And of course, it's Donald Trump who wants something bigger and better than anyone who came before. So that's an aspect, and you combine that with the national security strategy we had in December, where obviously we were all talking about the European section, which was pretty far back, if we're being honest. The number one section was the Western Hemisphere, in the sense that when they talk about America first, you have to focus on your backyard. It becomes the Americas first. And this idea of the way you really protect America is by making sure all the bits near it, all the countries near it have the right leaders and they go with the right protection, and you get what he calls the dome. So I think those are some of the thinking about you speak to people around Donald Trump. Of course, the way he goes about it, only Donald Trump can answer to that.
And I guess the question, when we started talking about this, it was almost a joke. Of course, he's not going to invade Greenland. He'll talk about it and then he'll do a deal. That's, he always overshoots through it rhetorically and then comes back to a reasonable position. And yet, the more people we talk last couple of days, last 3 or 4 days, you can't rule it out that he might just say, we're going to just plonk the flag of the United States into Greenland.
Completely. I've been speaking to figures in DC about this, for months, but particularly since Venezuela. And they would say, oh no, figures close to the administration, he's not going to invade. And I think as every week goes by and as we get another true social, now we get tariffs, no one is completely sure. Now, of course, this is Donald Trump, who famously said the problem with US foreign policy was it was so predictable. He didn't like that, they said, if you do this, we will move X troops to Syria or do strikes. And then that's exactly what America did. So he likes to have an element of surprise, and no one can quite know what he's going to do. But certainly, I think from DC to where we are today, no one is completely sure that this is such a bluff. I think invasion is still a very hard thing for Donald Trump to do. That would have a big Republican kickback, all these factors. But of course, if he thinks he can use tariffs and other means to really put the pressure on and, hurt the country, try and bounce them into something, that is a method, isn't it? You
mentioned the Republicans and there's also Congress as well. Is there an argument that they could find some way of limiting Donald Trump? Because are all Republicans behind him when he talks about Greenland? I can't believe Congress is entirely behind him when he talks about Greenland.
I think there's definitely a chance that Congress could intervene. We are, if we think of the first year of Donald Trump's return to the White House, one of the defining aspects has been the fact that Congress has been largely toothless. They haven't really checked his powers in various ways, and they have been criticised for that in some areas. But we have seen in recent months, whether it's the Epstein files, whether it's some issues on healthcare, that Republicans are starting to think about rebelling, so in some cases actually rebelling. So I think Greenland could be one of those. I think there's two ways of looking at it. I think if they thought he was actually going to invade it, you could potentially have a look at curtailing powers there. And I think that's something where some Republicans would want to go that far. Then there's tariffs. And I think actually here, there's another situation going on in the US, which is the Supreme Court case on whether Donald Trump's tariffs are legal. Of course, that doesn't that's not about what he has suggested he's going to do in Truth Social. But lots of Republicans are waiting to see how that court case plays out before they work out, what their position is on what Trump's saying now on tariffs.
And would they be scared of European tariffs, this sort of bazooka that exists. I mean, I love, we heard from Ollie Media that the first thing that Europe has to do is have a 10-week consultation
and
period.
only then if they can't agree.
Yeah, so it does strike me that the EU are bringing a water pistol to a gunfight with Donald Trump as ever. But I guess the whole point about the EU, which puts Starmer in a difficult position because we're close to the EU but not with the EU, is that as a collective mass, the EU has a bit of heft, it has a bit of economic power, and therefore could it bloody Trump's nose? Could it say to him, you do this to us, we're coming after you, we've got billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars to play with ourselves, we're coming for you?
I think if the European Union decides it wants to get into a trade war, in a way, all bets are off at that point. It's not going to be pleasant for America, but also, what is Donald Trump going to do in response? If you think about the China-US trade war, it led to lots of problems, but it did eventually lead to talks. I think it's just very hard to see. It's hard to know how Donald Trump, and it might just amp him up further. Yeah. And I think one of the difficulties Keir Starmer has, on top of working out where to sit the EU, is Donald Trump, I don't think, is going to look at things saying, oh, well, I disagree with Keir Starmer on Greenland, but let's keep talking on this border peace and balance. We've got all these other areas where we have common ground. I think the risk right now is it becomes, for a party and a MAGA movement, which has lots of scepticism towards Europe and NATO anyway, it pushes him further and further away.
Just finally, could there be a deal on Greenland and Ukraine together where he basically says either nudge, wink, wink, or explicitly, I will do something to support Ukraine if you give me Greenland?
I think it's possible. I mean, I think all these things are linked. If you think about the key figures who are some of these conversations, obviously you have the president, you have Marco Rubio, JD Vance, who've been speaking on Greenland to figures. They are also involved in the Ukraine discussions. So I think nothing is particularly separate when it's Donald Trump, and he likes to have a deal. And of course, as they all head to the snowy mountains in Davos this week, you have, the head of NATO, Mark Rutte, saying that he wants to talk. I think there will be an attempt to have some type of, maybe they won't call it a negotiation, but some type of diplomacy on the EU side before they press the trigger.
It's a hell of a time to be following American politics, Katie.
Yeah. And I will be in Davos later this week, so I'll try and watch it there.
Yeah, I would like to hear from you as well.
Take your snow boots because they don't grip the roads, apparently.
That's my task for the day, as well as covering this.
Yeah, you need shoes that you don't have to never change your shoes them. Is Dom's tip, because if you change your shoes, you get hyphened off into
you look amateur hour
into a cloakroom, and you never get to see the people. So you've got to wear shoes that you can wear outside and inside,
and get grips.
The recommendation is sturdy Chelsea boots with a flat sole and grip.
I'm glad it came on.
Yeah, don't say you don't know anything on this programme. We learn a lot from
top
you.
Tips.
We throw some mindless trivia back at you in your direction.
Offer you top tips.
That's Katy Balls, the Times Washington editor.